Welcome back to Fabled Dreams. Tonight, we return to the world of Myrtana, to the crumbling shores of Khorinis, where the echoes of a shattered barrier still haunt the wind. This is Gothic II, the legendary continuation of Piranha dark and atmospheric saga, a tale of gods, betrayal, and the fragile balance between faith and corruption. The prison colony has fallen, its convicts scattered, and the sleeper defeated. But peace was never meant to last. From the ashes of victory rises a new threat, one that no mortal sword can easily cut down. Dragons have awakened in distant valleys, their power feeding on the divine essence of Beliar himself. The balance between Innos and Beliar teeters on the edge, and once more, a nameless hero will be forced to walk the line between salvation and damnation. Among the sun-drenched farms and storm-battered cliffs of Khorinis, he will choose new allies, uncover hidden truths, and confront the legacy of his own past. Every decision, every blade drawn in shadow, will shape not just his fate, but the destiny of an entire realm. This is a Gothic II story. When the first rays of dawn fell upon the dark spires of Sardas's tower, the world seemed to hold its breath. The barrier that once imprisoned an entire colony of convicts had shattered months ago, and yet the echoes of its fall still haunted the land like distant thunder. Among the ashes of the old world, one soul stirred once more, the Nameless Hero, the man who had faced the sleeper and lived. He awoke within the cold stone chamber of Sardas's new tower, his body weak, his mind adrift between dreams and the silence of death. The necromancer stood nearby, shrouded in robes black as the void, his eyes glinting with a strange mix of calculation and purpose. It was Sardas who had saved him from the ruins, though not out of mercy. For Sardas had seen the winds of fate shifting, and he knew that the end of one evil only heralded the rise of another. The hero remembered fragments, the temple collapsing, the scream of the banished sleeper, the surge of energy that tore through the valley. He remembered pain, and then nothing. Now, as he stood upon trembling legs, Sardas spoke in his calm, chilling tone. The balance of the world had been broken. Beliar's influence, thought banished, was rising once again. Dark creatures roamed the lands outside the Valley of Mines, and across the sea, the Kingdom of Myrtana waged a desperate war against orcs that seemed endless. But here, upon the island of Khorinis, a fragile peace remained. A city thrived at its center, a bastion of commerce and corruption, guarded by the king's paladins and ruled in spirit by the Church of Innos. Beyond it lay farms, forests, and the rugged coastal cliffs that smelled of salt and decay. And far to the east, the once proud Valley of Mines had become a nightmare realm, where the orcs now built fortresses from the bones of the fallen. Sardas told him little more. His purpose, as always, was cloaked in shadow. The hero was to return to the world of men and learn what he could. But Sardas had one warning. The forces of Beliar were moving once more, and they would soon seek him out. Leaving the tower, the hero stepped into the morning mist. The air of Khorinis was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. The ruins of the old barrier still shimmered faintly in the distance, invisible walls broken and scattered like glass. Birds circled the cliffs above, and the faint hum of insects filled the air. It was a world reborn, yet tainted by the echoes of the past. The path down from Xardas's tower wound through forests thick with wolves and scavengers. The hero, still weakened, relied on instinct more than skill. The old reflexes of battle returned slowly, as did the memories of his comrades. Diego's cunning smile, Milton's quiet faith, Gorn's booming laughter, Lester's soft wisdom. All had survived in their own way, scattered across the island like seeds upon the wind. It was Diego who found him first. The rogue's eyes gleamed with the same spark of mischief as always, though there was something older in his gaze now, a shadow of weariness from too many betrayals and narrow escapes. He told the hero that Khorinis was not what it once was. The city had grown rich from ore and trade, but its heart was rotten. The merchants schemed, the farmers starved, and the king's tax collectors bled the island dry. More troubling still, strange creatures had begun to appear. Beasts twisted by dark magic, some born from nightmares that walked in daylight. Miners whispered of haunting voices from beneath the earth, and travelers spoke of robed figures preaching in secret corners of the island. The hero made his way toward Khorinis city, passing through farms guarded by fearful peasants. The land outside the city gates was filled with tension. Farmers worked fields under the watch of mercenaries, their loyalty bought by Ona, a powerful landowner who defied the king's laws. Onar's men were hardened, armed, and openly hostile to the paladins. Among them, the hero would later find familiar faces. Lee, the proud general exiled by the king, and Bennett, the blacksmith, whose skill could rival any master craftsman. Khorinis itself was a city of contrasts. Its upper quarter gleamed with marble and gold, where nobles dined and priests of Innos chanted blessings that few truly believed. Below, in the narrow alleys of the lower quarter, the air reeked of ale and desperation. Beggars fought over scraps, thieves plotted in taverns, and mercenaries sought fortune in the chaos. The city was alive, but it was the life of a wounded beast, limping forward while its heart rotted unseen. At the gates, the hero met Lothar, a paladin of Innos. The man's armor shone like a beacon, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. He warned the hero that entry to the city was tightly controlled. Rumors of dark magic and spies had made the guard paranoid. To gain access, the hero would need to prove his worth, either to the city's militia, the fire mages at the monastery, or Onar's mercenaries who ruled the countryside beyond. Thus began his new journey, not as a prisoner or an outcast, but as a wanderer caught between worlds. He would choose his allies carefully, for every path held danger, and every faction its own truth. The monks of Innos offered faith and structure, yet demanded obedience and purity of soul. The mercenaries promised freedom, but at the cost of blood and loyalty. And the city's militia offered order and power, though it served a corrupt and divided cause. As days passed, the hero grew stronger again. He trained with the sword and bow, rediscovered old spells from his days in the colony, and listened. Everywhere, whispers spoke of something stirring beyond the mountains. Paladins arrived by ship from the mainland, led by Lord Hagen himself, bearing orders from King Robar II. They sought the source of the evil that spread through Myrtana, a darkness born, they said, from the very mines beneath Khorinis, It was Milton who guided him toward the monastery. The young mage had risen among the fire mages, serving under Pyrokar, a stern but devout leader whose faith in Innos was unshakable. There, among burning braziers and chanting acolytes, the hero learned that the gods themselves seemed to be in conflict once more. Innos, the god of light and order, fought endlessly against his brother Beliar, the god of chaos and death. Between them stood Adanos, god of balance, the silent watcher, who neither judged nor interfered. The fire mages believed that the recent disturbances, the monsters, the corruption, the restless undead, were signs of Beliar's growing influence. But even Pyrokar's wisdom could not explain why these forces now centered around Khorinis. At the same time, far to the north, the Valley of Mines called to him. Once the heart of the barrier, now a desolate realm of orcs, undead, and forgotten temples. Lord Hagen refused to send his men there until proof of the threat was found, and so it fell to the hero to uncover the truth himself. The forests grew darker as he traveled further from the city. Shadows seemed to move at the edge of vision, and the cries of beasts echoed with unnatural tones. Bandits prowled the roads, led by the cunning Dexter, once a loyal servant of the Brotherhood of the Sleeper, now turned marauder. Each step closer to the valley brought new dangers, but also old memories. And somewhere beyond mortal sight, the gods watched. The road to the Valley of Mines was not one of triumph, but of memory and dread. The hero crossed the great pass as storm clouds gathered above, and the air grew colder with every step. The once green slopes were now scarred with blackened soil and bones half buried in snow. What had once been a prison was now a battlefield. The forests were gone, the rivers choked with ash. Even the wind carried the smell of smoke and old blood. The first sight of the valley struck like a blade through the heart. The old camps, the free mine, the swamp camp, the castle of Gomez and his men, all lay in ruin. Towering wooden palisades of orc design encircled the land, dotted with watchtowers where drums beat endlessly. Orcish war chants rolled across the valley, echoing from cliff to cliff. Between them, broken walls and scattered bones marked where humans had tried to stand and failed. Among the wreckage, only one human stronghold remained. The paladin fortress built atop the ruins of the old camp's castle. Its banners hung tattered, its walls cracked from siege after siege, but its gates still stood. Within, Commander Garon led what was left of the king's finest soldiers. Men hardened by endless battles, faces pale from months without sunlight. They greeted the hero with wary eyes, unsure whether he was salvation or another ghost risen from the valley's grave. Garon's words were grim. The paladins had been sent to reclaim the ore mines for the crown, but the orcs struck before they could fortify their position. The mines were lost, their men scattered, and the tunnels infested with creatures that defied understanding. The valley, once a place of human labor and lawless greed, had become a pit of death. To prove the truth of this to Lord Hagen, Garon needed reports from his missing mine foreman. The hero accepted without hesitation. He had been reborn to face darkness, and here the air itself whispered of it. His search took him deep into the remains of the free mine, where the cold bit like iron and the silence pressed down like stone. He found Silvestro's body, half buried beneath collapsed beams, his frozen hand still clutching a pickaxe. Farjeth's crew had vanished into tunnels where mine crawlers nested in the dark, their slick carapaces glinting in torchlight like black mirrors. Marcos was found last, wounded and delirious, whispering of shadows that moved like smoke and of voices that spoke in a language older than men. Each report painted the same picture. The ore was gone, the mines lost, and the valley claimed by powers beyond mortal reach. The hero gathered what evidence remained: ledgers, maps, fragments of broken ore, and prepared to return. But fate never allows easy paths. On the final day before leaving the valley, he heard a sound like thunder rolling beneath the mountains. The very ground trembled. From the mist rose a creature of impossible scale, a dragon, wings vast as fortresses, eyes burning with ancient fire. It did not attack, it only watched from afar, its presence an omen of what was to come. Garon called it madness. Dragons had not been seen in generations. Yet the paladins whispered prayers to Innos, their faith shaking for the first time. The hero said nothing. He knew that the world was shifting again, and that his path would lead him into that storm. He returned to Khorinis, a changed man. The forest no longer felt safe, and the laughter of merchants in the marketplace seemed hollow. When he presented Garon's report to Lord Hagen, the commander's stern composure faltered. He ordered his men to prepare, but their strength was not enough. The valley's corruption could not be fought with steel alone. That was when Hagen revealed the secret of the Eye of Innos, the sacred amulet said to contain a fragment of the god's own light. Only with it could a mortal face the spawn of Beliar without being consumed. The artifact was kept at the monastery, guarded by the fire mages for generations. If dragons had truly awakened, only the Eye could grant the power to confront them. But destiny is never merciful. When the hero reached the monastery, the Eye was gone. The monks were in chaos, and Pyrokar's fury shook the halls. A novice named Pedro had stolen the artifact and fled under the influence of dark magic. Outside the monastery, robed figures lurked in the mist. The Seekers, servants of Beliar, preaching doom in whispered tones that twisted men's minds. Pedro was found in the forest, trembling and hollow-eyed, his sanity devoured by the voices that had guided him. He clutched the Eye in trembling hands as the Seekers surrounded him, chanting a hymn of ruin. Before the hero could strike, they shattered the amulet upon the ground and vanished into darkness, their laughter echoing like cracks in the world itself. The mages despaired. The Eye could be reforged by skill of hand, perhaps, but not by magic alone. It was Bennett, the smith from Onar's farm, who restored its form, shaping the silver frame anew with hammer and will. Yet its divine power remained absent, its light cold and lifeless. To restore it fully, the hero sought help from every corner of Khorinis, from the fire mages of Innos, the water mages of Adanos, and even the forbidden knowledge of Zardas, who watched from his distant tower. For a time, enemies became allies. The priests of light and the followers of balance joined their powers in a ritual older than the kingdom itself. In a circle of flame, beneath the gaze of ancient statues, they called upon the will of the gods. Fire met shadow, light met void, and the world seemed to stop breathing. When the last word of the ritual faded, the eye shone once more, its glow pure and terrible. The hero felt it burn against his chest, alive again, the heartbeat of Innos himself. He knew what came next. The dragons had to fall. He returned to the valley with purpose carved into every step. The orcs sensed his approach. Their drums fell silent. The paladins who still held the fortress looked upon him with awe, for he seemed no longer merely a man, but something touched by destiny. The first dragon he faced was the swamp dragon, whose lair lay in the bogs where poisonous vapors rose from the earth. The creature's scales were slick with filth, its breath a cloud of rot. The hero's sword burned with the light of Innos, cutting through the mists like a beacon. When the beast fell, the eye forced it to speak, and from its dying breath came revelation. The dragons were bound by one will, an ancient master who slumbered in a place beyond mortal reach. The second dragon ruled the frozen cliffs of the north. The ice dragon, ancient as the first snows, breathed frost that turned flesh to stone. The hero fought through howling winds and buried caves, his companions aiding him, Gorn with his axe, Laris with his daggers, Milton's fire melting the frost. When the creature fell, it spoke of servitude and chains of darkness. Each dragon, it said, was a vessel of the undead dragon's will, the herald of a final awakening. The fire dragon came next, brooding in the heart of an abandoned mine. The air shimmered with heat, the walls glowed like embers. Every breath seared the lungs, every heartbeat felt like a drum of war. When the hero faced it, the flames seemed to recognize him. The dragon's voice was deep, ancient, and sorrowful. It spoke not of hatred, but of inevitability, of gods who play with mortals like stones upon a board. The final dragon dwelled in the forest, hidden beneath ancient ruins swallowed by roots. The stone dragon's scales were grey as mountain rock, its roar shaking the earth. When it died, the land fell silent. The orcish drums ceased, the skies cleared, and a strange stillness spread across the valley. But peace did not come, for as the last of the dragon's souls faded, their voices joined in a whisper that filled the hero's mind. He awaits, in the temple beyond the sea. The name of that place was Irdorath. The hero returned to Garond one final time. The paladin, weary but resolute, thanked him for what he had done. Yet both men knew that the true battle was still ahead. The valley, though freed of dragons, remained scarred. The undead still prowled the ruins, and the orcs had begun to withdraw, not in defeat, but in obedience, as if answering a distant call. When the hero brought news of the dragon's fall to Lord Hagen, the paladin's face was pale as marble. He offered the hero command of the ship Esmeralda, anchored in Khorinis harbor, and the loyalty of his men for one final voyage. The mission was clear: sail to Irdorath, the island of the dead, and end the corruption at its source. As the hero walked through the streets of Khorinis one last time, the city seemed quieter than before. The sun hung low over the sea, its light glinting off the rooftops. Farmers spoke of strange omens. Merchants locked their doors early, and even the priests of Innos whispered uncertain prayers. The world felt like it was holding its breath again. Diego met him at the harbor, leaning against a crate, that familiar smirk hiding worry. Gorn and Milton followed soon after, then Lester, calm as ever. Each of them had walked their own road, but fate had called them back together. They boarded the ship as brothers, not by blood, but by the bond of those who had faced the impossible and lived. The sails rose, the wind carried them into mist. Behind them, Khorinis faded, a memory of fire and stone, of laughter and betrayal. Ahead, the sea stretched wide and black, and on the horizon, an island waited like a wound upon the world. The Esmeralda cut through the grey sea like a silent blade. Wind howled against its sails, and the deck creaked with the weight of destiny. For days, the ship drifted through fog so thick that even the stars disappeared. The crew moved in whispers, their faces pale in the dim lantern light. Some claimed they heard voices in the mist, low and mournful, like chanting from beneath the waves. Others said they saw shapes moving just beyond the rail, too large to be fish, too slow to be whales. The hero stood at the bow, silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon that seemed to stretch forever. The others joined him in quiet moments. Diego, ever the realist, spoke of how strange it was to be sailing willingly toward death. Gorn sharpened his axe every night, as though preparing to fight the sea itself. Milton prayed softly to Innos under his breath, while Lester sat cross-legged on the deck, staring into the fog, murmuring that he could still hear the voices of the sleeper, not as commands, but as echoes fading into nothingness. One morning, the mist began to thin. The crew gathered as a black shape rose from the water ahead. It was not a mountain. It was too symmetrical for that, too deliberate. The island of Irdorath emerged like a nightmare-given form. Jagged cliffs jutting out of the sea, crowned by a fortress of stone older than any kingdom. Black towers pierced the clouds, and the air itself seemed to shiver. Lightning flashed, illuminating carvings of winged serpents and forgotten gods along the cliff sides. The very ocean recoiled from the island's shores, waves breaking short as if unwilling to touch its cursed sands. When the Esmeralda anchored in a small inlet, the silence that followed was suffocating. No gulls cried, no wind stirred the trees. The island smelled of iron, salt, and decay. The beach was littered with bones, not human alone, but things with horns and talons, remnants of ancient wars. The hero stepped ashore first, the eye of Innos glowing faintly beneath his armor, pulsing like a living heart. His companions followed, their weapons drawn, their eyes scanning the shadows. They advanced through ruined courtyards and shattered temples where statues of Beliar leered from the dark. Undead warriors rose from the sand, their armor rusted, their eyes burning with pale fire. Every corridor seemed to lead deeper underground, twisting through halls where murals depicted dragons bowing to a god cloaked in shadow. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became, thick with the stench of rot and the sound of whispers that slithered just beyond understanding. They came upon chambers filled with sacrificial altars, obsidian obelisks, and rivers of tar that pulsed faintly like veins beneath the stone. Each step forward was a descent into a forgotten religion, one built not on devotion, but fear. The seekers had come here before them. Their black robes hung from the walls like shed skins, and their corpses lay strewn across the floors, victims of the very power they had worshipped. Eventually, the hero and his companions reached a great hall, a cathedral of bone and black stone. Pillars carved in the likenesses of dragons held up a ceiling lost to shadow. The air shimmered with heat and the faint sound of a heartbeat, massive and slow. In the center of the chamber stood a mountain of skulls and ancient gold, upon which rested the creature that haunted every whisper, every dream since the fall of the sleeper, the undead dragon. It was immense beyond measure. Its wings were torn and skeletal, its body wrapped in sinew and shadow. The light of the eye reflected in its eyes, two coals burning in a void. When it moved, dust and ash rained from the ceiling. Its voice, when it spoke, was not sound, but vibration, a deep resonance that shook the bones of those who heard it. "Mortal child of Innos," it said, "you have come as it was written. You carry the light that burns, but even light casts shadow. Your struggle was foreseen, your defiance inevitable. I am the breath that remains when all fire dies. I am the echo of creation. You cannot unmake what was made before the dawn." The hero felt the weight of the eye upon his chest grow unbearable. Flames swirled around him, not burning, but consuming air itself. He drew his weapon, whether steel or blessed blade mattered little now, for this was not a battle of mortals. His companions shouted, scattering as the dragon unleashed torrents of fire and shadow that tore through the walls. The battle that followed was like a storm in a tomb. Gorn's axe cleaved through bones thicker than trees. Milton's spells blazed like miniature suns, driving back the darkness. Diego's arrows struck between the dragon's scales, each shot guided by years of quiet precision. Lester stood behind them, whispering chants of balance, his voice trembling but resolute. The hero moved through it all like a figure of light and will, every strike driven by purpose rather than rage. At last, with one final roar that split the air, the hero plunged his weapon into the dragon's skull. The chamber erupted in light so bright that it silenced everything. The creature convulsed, then fell still. The mountain of bones collapsed around it, and the tremors shook the entire island. The undead dragon was dead, or at least as dead as something born from darkness could ever be. But from the ruin rose a new form, not of flesh, but shadow. The air twisted, and within it a figure appeared, tall, cloaked, eyes glowing like embers. Sardas. The necromancer stepped forward, his expression unreadable, his movements calm amid chaos. "It is done," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "The balance must be preserved. This power cannot die. It must be claimed, or it will return again and again. You slew the beast, but you cannot destroy its essence. That is beyond you, beyond any mortal. I will take it." The hero, exhausted and bloodied, stared at him in disbelief. "You planned this," he said. "All of it." Sardas smiled faintly. "Planned. Number. Anticipated. The gods play their games, and we are their pieces. I merely choose which board I stand upon." He raised his hand, and the black essence that poured from the dragon's corpse coiled around him like smoke, sinking into his form. The ground split beneath his feet, and the light of the eye flared in protest. Then, with a final, searing flash, Zardas vanished. Silence returned. The temple began to collapse, walls cracking and ceilings falling in torrents of dust and stone. The hero shouted for his companions, gathering them as debris rained down. They ran through corridors now burning with unholy fire, chased by collapsing bridges and rising tides of molten rock. By the time they reached the surface, the temple had become a ruin of smoke and crumbling towers. They made it to the Esmeralda just as the island began to sink into the sea. Flames erupted from the cracks in the ground, and the black spire of Irdarath crumbled into the waves. The ocean hissed, swallowing centuries of darkness in one long exhale. On the ship's deck, the survivors stood in silence. The hero leaned against the railing, watching as the island disappeared beneath the waves. The sea was calm again, eerily calm, as though pretending nothing had ever happened. Milton was the first to speak. "What happens now?" The hero didn't answer. He turned the eye of Innos over in his hand. It was dull now, the glow gone. Perhaps its purpose had been fulfilled, or perhaps Innos himself had turned his gaze away. Diego looked eastward, toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to rise. "We go home," he said quietly, "if there's still a home to go to." The hero nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of Zardas, of that shadow rising from the dragon's corpse, of the calm certainty in his voice. Power like that was never taken without consequence. Somewhere, perhaps far beyond mortal sight, the necromancer was watching, waiting, reshaping destiny itself. The journey back to Khorinis was a blur. The sea was kind to them, the winds favorable. Yet the crew spoke little. Even laughter felt hollow now, as though they had left part of their souls on that cursed island. When the Esmeralda finally reached familiar waters, the world seemed quieter. The mountains of Khorinis loomed ahead, wrapped in mist, and for a moment, everything almost felt unchanged. But nothing was as it had been. The city had begun to rebuild, yes. Merchants shouting in the square, children running along the docks. Yet beneath it all lingered unease. The seekers had vanished, but their words remained, carried in whispers. That the war of the gods was not over, that balance had been disturbed. Some said the orcs were gathering again on the mainland. Others claimed that storms had begun to swallow entire fleets in the northern seas. The hero stayed silent. He knew the truth better than anyone. The real battle had only just begun. At night, he sometimes dreamed of Zardas. He saw him standing in a void between worlds, cloaked in shadow and fire, his eyes glowing like twin suns. He would speak, though the hero could never hear the words. And behind him, always, there was something vast. Not form, not face, just presence. Watching, waiting. The hero awoke each time before dawn, the sound of waves against the shore calling him back to the world of men. Yet even then, the silence of Irdarath still rang in his ears, the silence that comes after victory, the kind that hides another storm. And so the tale of Gothic II closes not with finality, but with breath held. The dragons were slain, but the god who moved them still stirs. The necromancer has claimed his place between divine light and eternal night, and the nameless hero, savior, wanderer, mortal caught in the games of gods, sails onward into legend, toward lands where war and prophecy wait to test him again. The world turns, as it always does, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls once more. The nameless hero once again stood where legends end and new myths begin. He had faced the wrath of dragons, the schemes of men, and the will of gods themselves, and against all odds, he prevailed. The eye of Innos restored, the forces of darkness pushed back, and the balance between creation and destruction held together by a single mortal's courage. Yet his victory came without glory or rest. The people of Khorinis would never truly know what was sacrificed to keep their world from falling into shadow. He walked away, as he always had, not toward applause, but toward another uncertain horizon. For heroes like him are not meant for peace. They are meant for the moments when peace falters. In the end, Gothic II is not merely a tale of dragons and gods. It is a story about resilience, about finding purpose in a broken world and choosing to stand when others would kneel. The nameless hero's journey reminds us that even in the darkest valleys, one soul's defiance can hold back the tide of oblivion. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the island of Khorinis, through the story of faith, power, and the fragile line between light and shadow. If you enjoyed this exploration of Gothic II's complete narrative, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to Fabled Dreams for more deep dives into the stories that shape our favorite worlds. Every realm, every legend, every choice, all part of the dreams we share. Until next time, may your path be guided by courage, your companions loyal, and your heart steadfast in the face of darkness. Sleep well, dreamers.